Secretary Oliver Dowden joins us now. Very good morning to you, Mr. Dowden. It's remarkable that he's apologising and saying that he's listening to fans now. It almost suggests that he didn't really understand football fans beforehand.
I think that's quite a correct interpretation, Susanna. It is extraordinary. And I think a lot of these clubs are going to have some making up to do with their fans. But I think fans today should savour that they have exerted their power, their voice has been heard. And as a government, we stood foursquare behind them from when this proposal first came about on Sunday night. Do
you think that all of the owners of the top six, big six clubs, as they like to think of themselves, do you think they all owe their fans an apology?
Well, it's up to them how each one reacts. I think it was good of him to make that apology. I think they need to rebuild the relationship between the club owners and the fans, because this has caused a lot of heartache. One of the things that really struck me in the meetings that I had with fans and the Prime Minister had with them, people who've supported a club their entire lives, never said a word against it, were spitting tacks at what they were seeing from these six clubs. And they were demanding that we stood up for it. And I'm glad that as a government, we said we would do whatever it took to stop this, to stand behind those fans, because this is as important part of our national heritage as our great museums, stately homes or works of art. We need to protect it.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the Premier League and football are one of our national treasures, the way we run the game. But it's interesting, isn't it? Yesterday, Boris Johnson said that he would put a legislative bomb under these proposals. It didn't need to do that because those top six clubs pulled back. But doesn't something need to change in the relationship between billionaire owners and their fans if those owners are so out of touch with the way that football should be run?
The short answer is yes. I mean, what the Prime Minister said, I think, was important, and I made this case as well to Parliament, that we wouldn't let this stand, that we stand behind the fans and the actions taken by the sports governing bodies. But at the same time, clearly we need to look to the longer term. Now, I think international investment in our clubs has been a good thing. It's driven up the quality of players, and it means pretty much every night you can see fantastic matches in the Premier League.
It's also seen huge prices charged for season tickets, for shirts. You know, John Barnes was talking about a sort of process of exploitation a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, and I think those are all very valid concerns. That's why I also announced on Monday that we'll be having a fan-led review led by Tracey Crouch, a former sports minister, a huge sports fan, and I think someone who commands support from all parties across Parliament and indeed from the fans themselves. And that will look at a number of things. It will look at the finance, the governance, but to what you were saying, Susanna, as well, the fans' experience as well. I think we need to use this as an opportunity, not say, well, we've defeated that proposal, it's all over with. Both the experience of this and indeed what we saw trying to keep the sport going during the COVID crisis and the financial issues there, we have got to look at this again.
But Mr. Dowden, though, you know, we've had ex-footballers on today and they've all kind of agreed that there is the sort of starting point of this, we're back to the status quo, which is still a terrible situation. This idea that we have the top six, the big six clubs, that is what has led to this, the arrogance from these big six clubs who have been allowed to be the big six clubs for so many years now, and their arrogance got ahead of themselves and they felt they could break away. The status quo is that we still have these big six clubs who still think they are bigger than everybody else. Does that have to change? Do we need to get rid of this idea that there are six big clubs in the Premier League, and does it need to be levelled? And therefore, as much as it has brought great players, but we have to look at the level of investment that some clubs have access to compared to others.
Well, I think we have to look, but my big concern coming out of this, and this is one of the points that was raised with me by fans, is fans having a stake in the game. And it's very interesting, if you look, no German club participated in this. They have much greater fan involvement. Fans were telling me about how over the years, the kind of investment of fans has diminished as they've been bought out by the big club owners. I think it's important that through this fan-led review, we do look at that aspect of the finance, because the owners, they're only temporary custodians of something. They hold it for a while, but that is a precious part of our national heritage, going back over a century. And I think the fans have more of a sense of that, how deep the roots of football are in our communities.
Do you want to move towards fans having more ownership of clubs? I mean, are you prejudging the fan-led review that Tracey Crouch has taken charge of?
No, I'm not prejudging it at all, but I hope, and we'll be publishing the terms of reference for it shortly, but in essence, the terms of reference are looking at the finance, governance and fan experience, that as part of that, Tracey will be looking at fan stakes in clubs. And I think it's right that we do that. But
would you like fans to have a greater stake, to have shares in clubs?
Well, yeah, in principle, I think it's a good idea. But again, I don't want to then end up preempting the fan review. It's important we look at that, see what the proposals that come out of it. But as I say, I'm not against foreign ownership of clubs and foreign owners investing in our clubs. I think it has been a good thing for the English game and indeed the game across the UK.
John Barnes, when we talked to him earlier, said he rejects the idea of government reviews, and he pointed to the review on racial disparities, which he said came up with a result which was that systemic racism doesn't exist, which he rejected. Now, he's not the only one. The United Nations, one of their working groups, has criticised that report's conclusion on institutional racism and has urged the government to reject the findings of that report and disband the commission. Considering what happened in America yesterday and the verdict in the case of Derek Chauvin and the murder of George Floyd, and the president there saying there is systemic racism at play, is it not time to, as a government, reject the findings of that report here in the UK, or do you think we have a different situation?
Well, first of all, I share the relief of people in America, and I'm sure people in the UK and across the world, that justice was done and seen to be done in that case. And I think it's a very important moment. And I know that lots of people had concerns about whether that would happen. In terms of the commission, it's an independent report and we'll respond to it. But as Secretary of State, I'm taking action. One of my really big concerns is about racism in football. And that's why I got together leading black football players. The kind of racist abuse that they were talking about was extraordinary. First thing in the morning, last thing at night, they're being abused. They shouldn't have to put up with that as part of doing their job as being footballers. That's why we're working with them to develop our online harms legislation, which will make sure that what's not acceptable on the street isn't acceptable online. And it's through measures like that that we're addressing.
But Mr. Dowden, John Barnes, you don't tell John Barnes about abuse. He got abuse on the pitch when he started playing football. But when you speak to these people, they will talk about online abuse, but they talk about, and John talked about quite passionately about systemic racism in this country. And he said America has just started to learn that. President Biden has admitted that, yes, we have a problem with systemic racism. What disappoints black people is that we continue to talk about casual racism, online abuse. That is not the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem for them is opportunity, is justice, is fairness, is equality. It's that the more black people are inclined to be unhealthy in this country, to be in poverty in this country. That is systemic racism. And your government report and your review deny that it took place. What are we going to do about that? That is the fundamental issue. Do we need to get another review, or do we need some honesty from the government right now?
Well, all of the challenges that you raise are important ones and that we're addressing. For example, you talk about opportunity. In the film industry, we have a fantastic film industry in this country, brilliant jobs that we want to do ourselves or our kids or our grandchildren to be involved in. That's why we're working with them to create opportunities for people who can't normally access that, particularly people from minorities.
So what you're talking about, that is systemic racism, isn't it? That is a system. That's the movie industry, the film. It's a system that you've identified. It doesn't create the right, fair opportunities for black people. Well, that is a sign of systemic racism, isn't it? That's not a racist director or a racist film company owner. That is the system. So that is systemic racism. Why can't we just say that's what it is?
Well, I think there are problems with opportunities in all of those industries, and we are addressing them.
So is that systemic racism? So is that systemic racism?
Well, I think systemic racism refers to society as a whole.
Well, I can tell you, well, society as a whole, in health, in business, in sport, in finance, in schools, in crime, in justice, black people are worse off. That I've just told you, just in 10 seconds, 10 different sections of society. That is systemic racism. Why can't you just say that, Mr. Dowden, and we can move forward and address it as a society? What are you scared of?
In relation to all of those things that you have raised, we are taking action to address them. I talked about what we were doing in respect of the film industry. If you look at what we're doing in respect of the police, we've got the most diverse police force we've ever had, and we're taking further steps to address that.
Let me ask you another way. Mr. Dowden, if we did have systemic racism in the UK, what would it look like? Tell us the signs. What are the signs that are looking for that I can then talk to you about systemic? If we haven't got it right now, what are the signs in this country that we'll need to be looking for when we'll know we've got a similar issue to in America of systemic racism in the UK?
I am not denying and I'm not underplaying the big challenges in terms of opportunity and all the other things that you have identified there. This report didn't identify a systemic racism, but that is not to undermine in any way all of the points that you made about that need to be addressed, and we are addressing those. OK, well, I think it just seems to be a very grey area. It feels like it's just the words. We just need to hear the words. I think a lot of black people just want to hear those words from people in power that, yes, we accept there's a problem in the system and we are going to work together. And I think a lot of people are waiting for that day. I want people that are listening to this show to understand that the government takes this exceptionally seriously and that we are seeking to address it in all the ways that I've described. And as a minister, I'm working tirelessly in order to ensure that, for example, in the area of online harms, we are seeking to address this. People should not feel the government does not take it seriously. We do take it very seriously, and we're working to create those opportunities.
Okay. All right. We appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us this morning, Oliver Dowden, on Good Morning Britain.